Joining me now, three of the best political analysts in the country, CNN contributor, New York Daily News columnist, Errol Louis. Errol, also the host of the morning show on WWRL in New York City. Ben Smith, senior political reporter, Politico. Good to have you with us. CNN contributor, syndicated columnist, Diana West. Great to see you, Diana. Let's start with an invasion that apparently this administration and no one else saw coming. Is this another demonstration of absolute incompetence on the part of the intelligence agencies of this nation?
Well, what would we have done about it? I mean, I think that this is the Russian...
Let's save that question and get to mine.
Well, I suppose yes, because we were all surprised watching the Olympics that this happened, certainly. But
now let's get to yours.
Okay. That is where I think this gets so interesting, because we're hearing that this is unacceptable from President Bush, from John McCain, I think from Senator Obama, although he's a little bit more nuanced perhaps. But what are we going to do about it? And I think that that goes to the fallacy of these international organizations that Senator McCain is calling on very specifically to get behind him and do something about it if he becomes president.
All right. Errol?
Well, I think it also knocks the props out of two important things that we've heard as received wisdom for years now. We've heard that the United States is the only superpower left in the world. Try telling them that in the Kremlin. We've also heard that democracies, the whole point of spreading democracy around the world is that democracies don't make war on each other. Well, apparently they do. And so...
Well, if you're going to buy into the idea that Russia is behaving in any way like a democracy, I think we're going to have a long debate.
Well, you could also, so if you kick the tires in Georgia, it's not the kind of democracy I think most Americans would necessarily recognize or even support. I mean, these
let's talk about some democracies
emerging.
that are. And if it weren't for the democracy of Ireland, for crying out loud, we'd see a centralized state in the European Union, thank you to the Lisbon Treaty. And we have the European Union behaving as an impotent shadow that is quivering in fear, apparently, of Russia.
But, I mean, you can't have it both ways here. I mean, either they're on the verge of being some terrible empire or they're an impotent shadow. I mean, I think Russia kind of, what it's doing now shows...
I only want it one way. And that's for you to hear me clearly when I speak, and that is that I was referring to the European Union as an impotent shadow and the state of Russia as a burgeoning restoration project to the Soviet Union empire days.
Right, I'm just saying that I think, what Russia's doing right now shows this difference between, you can argue about whether the EU is too strong or something like that, but they're clearly showing that they're a totally different animal right now.
It seems to me that they're rather impotent. How about you, Errol?
Well, I mean, I think they're dependent, as your report showed. I mean, they're dependent on gas from Russia. This is not. I mean, but this was the whole point, though, of the post-Cold War world, was to sort of create a sort of a European community in which you couldn't have nations going to war with each other. That the old Cold War barriers had to stay down because Germany can't all of a sudden. Get too harsh with Russia because they're supplying 40% of the...
When gas prices were lower, we had lots of leverage. We could threaten to pull loans from the IMF. Now we just don't have that leverage anymore.
We don't have leverage. The roles are actually reversed between Russia circa 1991 and the United States now in 2008. We are the nation that looks for all the world to be on the verge of being a debtor nation in perpetuity, and Russia is resurgent not only economically, but militarily.
Well, I think what this crisis underscores is, because this is once again a crisis that is complicated and deepened by oil. This kind of crisis, I mean, I would have liked to have seen the president come home early from Beijing and perhaps call Nancy Pelosi into the Oval Office and have a discussion about energy and drilling and this kind of thing.
Well, that hasn't gone so well so far with
No, it hasn't. It hasn't gone well at all.
If I may, speaking of two ineffectual leaders on a host and wide range of issues.
But it's nice to imagine.
Well, but maybe this is what we're looking at right now. We've had two presidential candidates, one of whom is on vacation, really not acknowledge the limits of power here. Nor the role of the European Union, as if it's some sort of irrelevancy, when in point of fact, it is, as I've said earlier in this broadcast, proximate and most affected by whatever policy decisions are made, because it is dependent upon Russia for 30% of its crude oil, 50% of its natural gas. What are the options?
But look, here are the options. What we need are big ideas. What we need is candidates who are going to step forward and say, as leader of the free world, we will lead the European Union to where they need to be.
We will lead the European Union. That is the kind of arrogance on the part of American leaders that has gotten us to this point. At least if it's arrogance, couldn't it be private? We'll talk about the private arrogance and the public arrogance of both Senator Obama and Senator McCain on this issue next. We'll be back with you, Ben Smith. Stay with us. We're coming right back. What are the moral responsibilities of this nation, the European nations that have invested in Georgia, and both in geopolitical and geoeconomic terms, Ben? What should we be doing? What should the Europeans be doing here?
Well, I mean, in a sense, we are the ones who probably owe the Georgians more. I mean, this was always considered a downside of the coalition of the willing. You know, these folks sent us all these troops to Iraq. They're the third biggest country there. So what do we owe them? I mean, apparently we do not owe them a war with Russia, and nobody has suggested that, and short of that.
Well, of course, the BP is a third investor in the world's biggest pipeline upon which Europe is dependent. So there is a deep partnership there as well.
Absolutely, but I mean, it's Russia's game. I mean, nobody has even hinted at the notion that we're going to resist them militarily.
Where are these candidates? Do you think that both of these candidates have done well? Do you think Senator McCain is conventionally considered, apparently, has done better and improved his lot as a forceful leader that voters would respond to?
McCain has always viewed Russia with great suspicion, seen it as, seen it the way almost everybody now sees it. And he came out instantly and said, said that this was a real invasion when it still wasn't totally clear to everybody that it was. It then became that Bush, Obama, everybody else has kind of followed.
Do you agree, Dan?
I do, but at the same time, by invoking all of the different international groups, NATO, G8,
WTO.
Yes, and also the EU, he is calling upon these groups to do something, and it remains to be seen whether there's any will or garrote in these groups to actually affect any changes in this.
Your assessment, Errol?
The old issue that's been dogging the McCain campaign, his connection with lobbyists, I think it sort of pokes its head up here. He's got a top staffer who's been on the payroll of the Georgian government for a long, long time, and it may not lead him in a wrong direction, but the fact that you've got influence there is something that he's got to answer for.
And is it interesting that Senator Obama has been far more constrained in his rhetoric, at least?
Oh, indeed. Well, that's right. I mean, and frankly, less plugged in. I mean, McCain was Johnny on the spot because he's got an inside connection to the Georgian government.
And they're in the conundrum, those lobbyists with influence and sometimes knowledge that is helpful, at least to candidates, if not to government. I had to throw that in. Errol, thank you very much. Diana, thank you. Ben, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, our poll, 92% of you responding that the European powers should be leading the Western response to Russia's invasion of Georgia. Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us here tomorrow. For all of us here, we thank you for watching. Good night from New York. The Election Center with Campbell Brown starts right now. Campbell?
Thanks, Lou. Hi there, everybody. There is a new war tonight, and it is breaking news. With the